Celsius, Kelvin, Fahrenheit. Hello, WM Siegel here. Talk about weather weather problems and emergency response and things like that. Um, I heard recently, and it's people talk about it probably my whole life, but getting rid of FEMA, you know. And now it seems like there's someone who would do it and will, likely. Uh, and I understand that, there's a lot of anger behind how things have been responded to in the past. Um, and, this administrative behemoth that has to handle all this stuff. Um, a lot of that comes from us not understanding what their role is, what they're supposed to do, what we think they do, um, and what insane misinformation gets spread by crazy people. But that nonsense aside, you know, if you did get rid of federal emergency response, even just an office, something downsized on an administrative level, um, you're sort of making the statement that storms only hit state by state, or that disasters only hit state by state, and you're going to put a lot of stress that already exists on state interstate relations when it comes to these types of responses. One state might pay, they might have the best emergency, it might be Georgia Emergency Response Agency has better equipment than Florida Emergency Response Agency. Um, Storms don't hit state by state, If something smashes against the borderline coast, Americans shouldn't have separate care, or not care, but I mean, we should be watched over equally. If you live a mile away from me and you're in Georgia, both our houses washed away, and you're in a trailer the next day, nice and warm, and I'm in a tipped over canoe, you know, screaming at gators. That's not fair, But that is what could come out of this. Only because you're not giving state governments enough time to even have foresight. There's going to be new positions that need to exist. They're going to have to expand their emergency response agencies, which is going to cost money, and they're not going to be able to. There's not going to be any federal money. The Another piece of this that is worrying is that it will open the window for privatized emergency response, which already exists to a degree on a voluntary level. You have things like Rubicon, and what they'll do is show up as like a voluntary support to an existing framework. But if there's no existing framework, what are they coming into? Who are they reporting to? What happens when they don't do their job? Who's liable? You shouldn't privatize emergency response. We've already done it enough. We have it enough. And the liability on that is difficult. Excuse me. But the wildfires, hurricanes, floods, these things cross borders. We need an overarching concern. We need to be looking after one another. This stems from some kind of states' rights, hate and taxes, small federal government type of thing. That only works if we're raising generation after generation of people with integrity, but we're not, and we have to understand that. You're not helping your neighbor. You're not shoveling their driveway. I mean, not you. Maybe you are. Maybe I am. Who knows? But not enough of us are. So why should we think that you're going to help them when there's a flood? And people say, well, you never... Yeah, I don't want to wait and find out, And I also don't want local governments to feel strong-armed into signing contracts with essentially private security firms, because those are the ones that are going to have the infrastructure and the equipment. So you're going to have people like Eric Prince, things like Blackwater, which then became XE, which then can change its name to something else. Every time something goes wrong, they just reincorporate, get a new contract. There's no accountability, and their staff, the people that are staffed by private security firms, and I don't have a bad opinion of those, by the way. They serve a very important role in a lot of places. They also do bad things, but you're drawn to that not because you want to help people in a mudslide. It's just a different type of person. You're going into it for different reasons. The type of person you want going into emergency response is the type of person who would do things like Outward Bound when they were younger. Maybe a Boy Scout, somebody who did the Peace Corps, somebody who wilderness EMT, somebody who smoke jumped. People who are drawn to service, to local service, community service. They want, volunteer firefighter. These are the types of people, they have it in them. And we're all alive because of these people. They have this integrity in them that even in this world, they're drawn to help people. And if you get rid of an outlet for them to help people, it's not good. And we need a federal eyeball. You have to have it. They need to be trained in meteorology. They need to be trained in all this stuff. It's all so important. We're getting offshore earthquakes, off of Maine more often than I think in the past. I've noticed it. But, that just in the back of my head, if that went nuts in like a movie way, you would have to have strong coordination between the Canadian islands, Maine, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, everything. Probably New Hampshire. Without FEMA, any kind of huge ocean event in the United States, again, would be a bigger disaster. It's unfair to point to the way something was handled and say, look how bad it went. Because what you should be doing is saying, look how bad it would have gone without. There's too much jumping to say, this is wrong, I'm right. You're not right, it wasn't wrong. We all need to be looking for truth. And we need to be looking to the people with integrity, the people who like to volunteer, the people who are drawn to these jobs. Ask them why they do that job and just sit in awe and be impressed. And be like, thank you for doing that job. Because I'm not going to do it. We just can't have that. Opening the window to private security to handle domestic things is not good. Russia does it. That's Wagner, that's exactly what they do. They do disaster response stuff, but globally, they'll contract with an African country because of, it doesn't always have to be civil unrest, they'll go in there and say, oh yeah, they were trying to make a bridge, we're trying to help out. Come on. You don't get kicked out of Mossad and join Wagner because you want to help villagers. It's not. There's something in that person's spirit that isn't going to jive with the mission. Getting rid of FEMA will open the window for private emergency response, and those will be staffed entirely by ex-military, and that's not what you want. It just isn't. It's not going to work, and it's good. And that lack of foresight is the danger. That's the spark. That's the person who doesn't put out their campfire all the way. And it's dangerous, and it's it's one thing that the Haudenosaunee, or we know them as the Iroquois, were known for. Any decision they made, how many generations in the future will this affect? And it's important to note that Thomas Jefferson, who was sitting in longhouses and lodges and observed and learned a lot of process from the Haudenosaunee, much of which got incorporated into our government, the United States government. Probably the finest, purest points of our existence come from those people. And to ignore foresight is unpatriotic, is what methinks.